All right. So, wanted to just say, I know that, thank you, by the way, for those of you who did send some notes in advance to let me know why you were interested in this topic and why you are here. And so you mentioned things like, how do I stay connected to my virtual team? And how do I know how people are doing and what's the best way to stay in touch? Are they really doing the work? And what's the quality of the work that they're doing? And how do you get accountability and assure results? And many of you are wondering, how do you motivate or how do you inspire your virtual team? So we're going to be covering a number of things like that this evening, so that therefore you'll have some actual takeaways that you can use immediately. So we're going to be covering a lot of things like this, such as what's the role of the team leader? And I'm assuming that many of you are team leaders who are actually here. And we're going to talk about what kinds of team meetings can you conduct? What's the value of them, the advantage of them? How do you use them? And since this is only an hour, there's only so much we can cover. So we'll cover just enough to get you started. However, I'm also going to share with you how you can extend your team development experience and also continue your work with me on your leadership journey. So we will cover that as well. We also will talk about different ways that you might communicate individually with your team members. And everything that we're going to cover tonight, not only is it appropriate in a virtual context, these are best practices that are useful for teams at any time. What's different in the virtual context is you have to be much more intentional and you have to do a lot more to have the same impact. So just keep that in mind. Whether you're working virtually or not, the information is still relevant. Now, the current business environment is varied depending on where you are, what business you're in, and what kind of an organization. Many organizations are closed, not open at all, or maybe they're partially closed. Some people are working, some people may be on furlough. There's some situations where people are working exclusively from home. In other scenarios, you've got some employees of the company working at home while others are at the office. And I even have some clients where the same worker is sometimes in the office and sometimes working from home. So those are some of the most common things I'm seeing in the current business environment. All right, so then we will proceed to the very first poll, which is related to what I was just talking about. So if you think about your current organization and your circumstance, which one describes you? So go ahead and answer, just as Jackie was mentioning, move your mouse over to whichever button makes the most sense for you. And we'll take a little poll right now. All right, so we have many who are working from home. Okay, that looks like the biggest category. And that's interesting. No one on this call is in a situation where the organization is closed. Well, congratulations. That's wonderful for you in that case. All right, so working from home is the biggest thing. And it looks like we've got some people who are in a mixed situation too. All right, so thank you guys for responding to the poll. There were a few who said other. Maybe you might put in the chat box what your situation is if you're in other. And so, Jackie, I'm going to keep going on and we'll come back to anyone who's written anything in on other in a minute, okay?
Perfect.
All right, so let me just share with you personally my virtual reality. I actually travel about 75% of the time, and most of that is on the airplane. And so I've moved from being gone most of the time to being home every day. And most of my travel related projects have moved to the fourth quarter of this year. And because my husband's used to having the house to himself, I have actually disturbed his introvert haven. And so now I've got to remind him to turn down the TV, stop the music, or wear headphones while I am on different calls and conducting different business. And so you'll see on this picture here, there's a little avatar of my husband, Greg, right over there as well. Fortunately, we have a beautiful setting in the mountains, so we can look outside the window and see Pikes Peak. Also in my virtual reality, I've got to be concerned now about the home telephone. And sometimes I spend some time just turning that off or just taking it off the hook so it doesn't disturb me. And this is a real big issue. Internet. I'm in an internet dead zone that's not served by high-speed internet. That's very challenging when you're going virtual. So I have to come up with all sorts of workarounds and make sure that I'm able to join most of the meetings in some fashion. And frequently that means my video might not be on. And because of all of the requirements to decontaminate and wear masks and all of this, it takes longer to go out and run any errands. And it takes a little bit longer even to cook lunch. I think in the past, I might have a lunch already prepared or one that's ordered to come in. And from home, I've got to remember to leave a little bit of extra time to cook lunch as well. And then in this context, I am going to church virtually on Sundays and on Wednesdays, and that's through Zoom platforms and Zoom meetings. And so that's a big difference as well for me personally. So what else are you dealing with that I didn't mention? There may be some frustrations or differences or changes. So write your situation in the chat, what's going on with you now. And as you're writing that in, Jackie, what else came up on the previous poll about the other?
Nothing else came up in the chat.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so go ahead and add something in the chat now about what you're dealing with that I didn't mention. Some of you probably have children at home or issues with pets and so on. So there may be some other situations.
All right, so we have completing my doctorate from on-site to online webinar overload. Oh my goodness, I cannot imagine, right? And you
Yeah,
guys
that's
can,
very challenging. Yes.
yeah. Well, I answered too, even though you guys can hear me. Screaming toddlers. My toddler's outside right now, running around the neighborhood screaming. I'm so sorry. Sherry said expectations that at home means always available. And our organization is dealing a bit with webinar burnout. Ooh, it's really easy for individuals to tune out.
Exactly. Great. All right. Well, then we will continue on. These are very um, common kinds of issues that you guys are dealing with.
Oh, there's a
Whoops.
couple more. I don't like
A
being,
couple more come in?
yeah, at this level. Valerie said, I don't like being isolated at this level. My brain is freezing. And Nana said, I
Mm,
don't work on a team, but work with people who have teams. Some clients have put me on hold. So those were two more.
okay, very good. Well, one of the things that we've done as an organization in terms of changes that we've seen so far in this season is most of my clients are actually presidents or CEOs of companies, and they're in situations where they're making really tough decisions right now, how to protect their workforce in the midst of the pandemic. They're making decisions sometimes about layoffs and furloughs and other kinds of issues like that. And these are tough decisions. So one of the things that we've done is we've increased the number of touch points that we have with our clients so that they actually have our help and they actually have our advisement about making those tough calls. And that's just included in whatever they've been investing in our consulting services already. It's not an extra charge. We just know that they need that right now. And so we are providing that. I also have participated in one of our client situations that became a virtual event, and we streamlined a 3-day meeting on Zoom for about 80 participants. And very similar to what someone just said here in the chat, because it is so fatiguing on Zoom, and these particular clients actually have to do a lot of government related meetings, community meetings, and so on Zoom. We made the meeting a little bit shorter and far less of the Zoom time because they were already burned out on Zoom. So that's a real issue, what I'll call Zoom fatigue. And as we talk about the different meetings that you can have, we'll also talk about ways to deal with that. I also attended a 1,600 person conference. It was a 3-day conference that had pre recorded elements and live sessions as well. So that was an experiment. And probably the most innovative conference that I participated in had 3,000 people. It was multi-day. It was on Zoom. They used breakout rooms, breakout sessions. The whole thing was live and it worked extremely well. So there are ways to have more of these kinds of meetings and so on. Advantages during this time is certainly saving travel time by car, by plane. In my case, I can incorporate better my physical fitness routine into the midst of my day. And my husband, who's twice retired, I get to eat lunch with him most days. So I'm maximizing this whole gift of time by getting lots of projects done. As a company, we've been really working on a lot of virtual products anyway, and now we have the time to really make them happen. And so that's what we've been doing a lot of. And because we're in a virtual context, not only do I attend my own church service virtually, there's a favorite church I have on the East Coast, and I can also attend that service and still get to my own church service because of the time difference. So those are some advantages of this time for me. So I want you to think about the advantages for you during this time as well. And we know that not everything is an advantage, and some of you may be experiencing some losses, or there may be some mourning that may be going on. Yet at the same time, there is still some opportunity in this season. And I want you just to think about that and just write in the chat box, what do you see as an advantage in this season for you? So Jackie, what are we seeing so far?
Perfect. We are seeing daily walks with my husband and no commuting, meal prepping, walking daily, daily exercise, not using gas.
Yeah, those are wonderful things. And not using gas. I have a gas guzzler car. That's been really great.
Yeah.
Not having to deal with that.
Oh, yep. An improvement in quality of air. Have had time to write a series of articles. And I love being able to eat all meals at home. I love to exercise at home.
Wonderful. And the good thing about eating your meals at home is you get to eat whatever you want, which is, I really like that too.
Oh, and here's another one. Adult college kids are home. I'm so blessed to have this time with them.
I love that. In other words, just some time with people we love and family members,
Mm.
whether it be spouses or children, adult or little ones, either one. And I love the fact that several of you talked about ways that you're being productive during this time. So that's fantastic. So I want to just talk now about why this is the perfect time to build and develop your team. Right now, there are actually some new needs in a way that are created by physical distancing. And I want you to notice I'm calling it physical distancing rather than social because we can still be social with one another even if we're not physically in the same place. So I'm going to call it physical distancing. So, right now, organizations, their normal status quo is disrupted. And I have several clients who were totally against anything that was virtual. And because of this scenario, they've had to adopt more of a virtual approach. And what many of them are discovering is that some virtual work actually does work well. And what this means is that the new normal that we're going to get back to is not going to probably be all the way the same as the previous normal. There's probably some aspect of the virtual work environment that will continue even as we go forward. So if you start now, get your teams ready and start building them at this time, they'll be ready to take off later. People are really looking for and they need leadership in this time because of the uncertainty. So take advantage of the fact that people are in an unfreeze mode, meaning, oh, this is new. I'm not sure what to do. So they're looking for new solutions. And secondly, with uncertainty, people are looking for you as a leader to step up and show the way. So that's another thing that you can do as well. All right, so this is my definition of what is a high performance team. It's a group of individuals with diverse and complementary skills whose interdependent work, synergistic relationships, and process of learning together are essential for exceptional performance of a complex task. And I want to highlight those words that are in sort of like the rust colored red there. When we call it a team, that means the work that the group is doing is interdependent. I can't get my work done unless you do your part. You can't do your part unless I do my part. So neither one of us can do it alone. It requires the interdependence. In addition, it's something complex. Complex meaning that one person can't do it by themselves. And if it's a high performance team, the results are exceptional. We're not talking about mediocre work. We're talking about really nailing it and doing a great job. And in order for that team to be effective, you want to have diverse people. That means people with different gifts, strengths, and talents, and talents that are complementary skills, so that when they're all put together, you actually can do more and accomplish more than if you were operating by yourself. So that's really what we're talking about when we talk about a high performance team. Now, as the team leader, your role primarily is going to be to provide that clarity and that focus. What is it that we're working on right now? Now, you might think to yourself, well, we've got 4 or 5 things we need to do. Here's what I've observed over time. The most successful businesses have a focus for right now, and you want to know what that focus is and be able to articulate it clearly to your team. When an organization tries to do too many things at once, they end up not doing any of them very well, and it takes longer to get them done and not at the same quality. Whereas, let's say there are 3 things you want to do, but you put a priority on number one, you get that done, you get number two, get that done, number three, you're going to get them done faster at a higher quality, and your team members are going to know how to orient their time. You want everybody aligned and on the same page, knowing what to work on. What is the current focus? You also want them to know what is not the focus. So maybe your team member is working on priority B, and you might need to bring them back to priority A and say that priority B is going to come later. Also, as the team leader, you are providing resources that they need in order to achieve that number one priority. And if there are barriers in the way, you're removing those barriers, whether they be people or other challenges or difficulties. And you're helping your team to make what I'm going to call connections. And these are connections at a different levels. There may be other team members they need to connect with, other people outside of the team, or even outside of the organization. And sometimes they're conceptual connections. Maybe Project X is connected to Project Y, and you might need to talk about that or explain it because it may not be intuitively obvious to the team members themselves what those connections are. So when you think about these actions of a team leader that I just mentioned, which ones of these is your strength, your superpower? What are you particularly good at? Are you good at providing that focus and clarity? Are you great at getting everybody aligned on the same page? Are you very good at saying what's not the focus? Are you good at providing resources, removing barriers, making connections? So just put up here on the poll, which one is your superpower? Fantastic. And a good number of you actually say that providing focus, clarity, and the priority, that's your superpower. And some of you are also saying providing resources. Wonderful. And we've got a few in some of the other categories as well. You might wonder why I asked you, what is your superpower? It's very important to remember your strengths even as you go forward, because that's what you're going to use as the lever, as the bridge, as the way to step into the next level of success, knowing what you are really good at. All right, so I'm going to talk about a number of different kinds of meetings that you can have in the workplace. And this first one I'm going to refer to is what's called a connection meeting. And I want you to understand that at this time, there really is an emotional cost to isolation. And because of that, it's even more important that you show and demonstrate that you really care. You may have people who are going through crises right now. They might need a chance or an opportunity to vent what's happening with them. And the connection time allows you to be able to share deeply and personally What's going on with me right now? How am I? How's my family? What kind of isolation or frustration or disconnection am I experiencing? And you want to have some time for people to get to know each other, to find those common threads between their experience and what they're going through. And the reason, in a business sense, obviously you do this because it's a human aspect and it shows true caring. On the business end, it provides a foundation so you can have more profound collaboration together. Organizations that take time to connect in this deeper way actually will be more productive in the long run. And so when you have a connection meeting, it may be that a whole meeting is dedicated to that, and you're really hearing each person's personal story or journey. Here are some kinds of questions that you could ask for connection meeting purposes. You could ask, what have you learned, from your background or from your culture that informs how you live today? So for example, being both African American and also Native American, where many things have happened to my ancestors and people from my background, and some of those things being negative things, one of the things I've learned is forgiveness. Forgiveness is important because when you hold bitterness, you're just holding yourself back. So that's one of the things I've learned from my culture. What is a hobby or cause that you're passionate about and why? Maybe you're interested in feeding people who are hungry, not just overseas and way across in foreign lands, but perhaps it's right here in the United States because you know that people are struggling even in first world countries during this crisis. And what are the unique or interesting experiences that you've had in your life? In my case, I think being an active duty Army officer was certainly a unique experience that has brought certain perspectives to me. Where have you traveled and what have you learned from those travels? I've traveled all over the place, all over the globe, and probably some of my more interesting travel places would have included, for example, going to Saudi Arabia and working there. Very unusual for someone who is not Muslim to be able to go into a country like Saudi Arabia and work in that context and get to know the people and to really come to appreciate and respect people from a different culture. So again, lots of ways and things you could say about that. So again, why this connection? People work best with those that they know, they like, and they trust those people. And the connection increases appreciation, empathy, and caring for one another. It lays that foundation for what I'm going to call the collective innovation and creativity. As human beings, we were meant to be connected, and we thrive when we're connected. And this is even more important in this crisis because crisis is disconnecting. And what you'll find, the more you connect together, you'll be able to innovate together as well. Now, I'm going to go on and talk about some other kinds of meetings now, too. Here's something I want you to realize, though. A big organizational mistake is not having enough meetings. And that's going to strike you as odd because a lot of people are feeling like, I'm in too many meetings and it's taking away my time and it's driving me crazy and they're not well run. And that's a whole nother issue. Sometimes the meetings are oppressive because there are too many subjects or topics in one meeting. It doesn't belong there, or there's a lack of focus and organization in that meeting, or perhaps the meeting isn't well run. So just remember, you want to keep in mind that if you have the right meetings for the right people at the right time, that is actually effective. And some of you may need to increase meetings, but shorten times and so on. So here's a meeting that you can have. You can have what I call a daily quick start meeting. It's at the beginning of the day with your team. Even if your team is working virtually, you can get on Zoom or some other platform for, I'm talking only 5 or 10 minutes. This works best when your team is relatively small, let's say 6 to 10 people. If you have a lot more than that, you may have multiple teams and you might want to meet with them separately for this quick start meeting so that you're meeting in these smaller groups and can get out in about 10 minutes. All you're doing is checking in, make sure everybody knows what the topic is for the day, what is the priority and focus of the day, and each person knows and they're able to say out loud what it is that they're doing and what do they need. What do they need in order to do what they're doing? And what are their deliverables going to be at the end of that day? You, as the leader, you're listening because you're listening to find out who on that call may be someone you need to reach out to because they need some additional help, or they might need to be connected to another team member or connected to a resource that's outside of the team. So when you're listening, listen for who you might need to schedule a meeting with where you go a little bit deeper. But this is simply a quick start, just 5 or 10 minutes. So you're having a touch point. Everybody knows what they're doing for the day, and you know what they're doing for the day. Similarly, you want a daily wrap-up meeting also, which would be at the end of your workday. And you're asking then where people are coming on that call, again, is brief. We're talking 10 minutes. What did I accomplish? What are the loose ends that remain? What do I need in order to finish those? And they may even have ideas about how to change certain processes in order to get to the next level or the next step. What you're listening for here is if something was missed, what is that person's plan for making it happen? And maybe as you hear that plan, maybe more needs to be a part of it than what they're saying. That lets you know, again, who you might need to reach out to more individually, who might need a little bit of extra help from you in that case. There are also what we call tactical meetings. It says 60 to 90 minutes here, and I would suggest in a virtual environment, you want to err more towards the side of the 60 minutes. This is where you come together. It's almost like if you think about your weekly staff meeting, it's like your weekly staff meeting. You come in and you're hearing from the team real time. What are obstacles? What are issues they're facing right now that are affecting their focus, affecting their priorities? So you can create right there in the moment an agenda, because what is key about this meeting is it's real time. What is affecting us now? How can we talk about it? How can we decide we're going to operate differently on this issue so that we have greater success? So you use the tactical meeting for that purpose. Now, it may be that, let's say you've already done a big connection meeting at some point in time, and maybe it'll be a while before you do another one. But for these tactical meetings, you can add a 10-minute brief connection time right on the front end just to see how people are doing and what it is that they might want to share from their reality and whatever is going on with them. You also want to add something we call a strategic meeting. A strategic meeting, this one you have an agenda in advance. There is some issue that you're bringing the team together to talk about. And if you're spending maybe an hour or more on one issue, if you have a 2-hour meeting, you may only get to 2 issues that you're going to address that's really affecting the strategic long-term health of the organization or an opportunity. So imagine if you were a retail manufacturer store and you normally sell clothing and all the stores are closed right now. Your organization might need to talk about what could we do during this time. Maybe we could make masks. Maybe we could make something that's needed in the medical field at the moment, or where there's maybe a critical shortage. How can we pivot a little bit to take advantage maybe of the strategic opportunity and also stay afloat? Or if you're an airline and people aren't flying as much, perhaps you could fly critical medical supplies and critical medical personnel to different locations in order to do their work. So in that strategic meeting, you're brainstorming together and you're talking about how you're going to step in to the new world and what are you going to do different in order to continue to be successful. Then more long-term, when you think about future planning offsites, if you're meeting in person, this might be 1 to 2 days that you do quarterly. If you're meeting on a virtual platform, then what I might suggest here is that you meet in half-day increments. And it could be a couple of or 3 half days in succession together, or you could spread them out, maybe a half day this week, a half day the second week, a half day the third week. So again, that people are not getting burned out with the Zoom fatigue. And here you're now thinking about your strategy in a big picture way. You're thinking about your strengths as an organization. What are your abilities? Because operating in your strengths, that's your sweet spot. You're also assessing what's going on out there, the competitive landscape. What are the industry trends out there? What opportunities can we pursue? How are we going to continue to develop as a team? What are our team needs? So in essence, that's how you're spending this quarterly planning, just to make sure that you are on track. Something that's not here that I think is important is, what do we need to learn? So it's not so much that you're trying to overcome weaknesses, but as you're into pursuing a new opportunity, you have to learn new skills. Well, what are those? These are the things you want to talk about in those quarterly planning meetings. Now, some other kind of virtual meetings that are kind of fun that you can have for different purposes, you can have what's called the hangout meeting. So let's say some people, and this depends on personality, whether people will want to do a hangout or not. If you're the kind of person who is, let's say, extroverted and you like to work with other people, you might say, I'm going to be on a hangout time on our virtual platform. And you say when you're going to be there, and I'm just going to be working. And you invite other people to also sign in. They're there hanging out, doing their work. You're not necessarily doing the same work, and you may or may not interact very much per se. Periodically you would. It's simulating what it's like to be in the office. And so you could just hang out together on a virtual platform and do your work. Similar to that is the collaboration meeting, except what's different in the collaboration meeting is that you actually are all working on the same project, but you have independent parts of it to do. So you're working independently, but you're all on the virtual platform together, so that as you're working, you might say, hey, John, what do you think about so-and-so? Or John might say, Sally, what do you think about this? Or I'm considering so-and-so. So you can continue to interact with one another, and it's punctuated with periods of interaction, periods of working independently, but you're in the same room. The other meeting that's listed there is office hours. Now, this is different than one-on-one meetings. If you want to do a one-on-one meeting with someone, do schedule that and do a one-on-one meeting. Office hours simply says, for example, you as the team leader, I'm going to be on the virtual platform between these hours. You want to touch base with me? You want to ask me any questions? You want to get some input on something? Just join me during the office hours. Now, people may come or they may not come, but they know you're there, they know you're available, and you can serve them and meet their needs. So here's some meeting best practices. First of all, meet often in some of the ways we're talking about. Meet short, in a virtual context especially. You don't want to keep people on these meetings hours and hours on end. You have to consider that you want to involve people, diverse people in the meetings, not just the insular team that becomes then a silo. So we begin thinking about who else needs to be here? Who else might we invite from elsewhere in the organization, outside the organization, or another team to weigh in on the current issues that we're dealing with right now? And as we mentioned already with connection meetings, there are personal things and business issues also that you want to bring up. It's not all 100% business, and especially not at this time, because people are working in their home context and there are other priorities that they also have in their life, and you want to acknowledge that. So if their children, spouses, or pets make a cameo visit, on the Zoom meeting, it's okay. That's another way to get to know people at a deeper level, is to see and meet their children, pets, or spouses at different times. And then I would say, let's say you have a lot of meetings in one day. Rather than just staying on the platform and continuing to the next meeting, take a true defined break between meetings. Give yourself a chance to recuperate. I was talking to a client of mine yesterday who had been on so many Zoom meetings in one day that he said at the end of that day, he was so exhausted, he just had to get in the bed for 4 hours just to recover. And just imagine, part of it is the fatigue, the Zoom fatigue, but also it was the nature of the conversations and the kind of tough decisions that they had to make in their business. And I know in a couple of weeks, I've got a meeting, this an all-day meeting that I'm having with a client. However, instead of just going from one meeting to the next like we usually do, we're taking half-hour breaks between each of those meetings. So just remember to do that as well. So when you think about all of these meetings that I've covered so far, which ones of these meetings do you personally most need to implement in your organization? So if you'll write that in the chat, what do you most need to implement? All right, so it looks like we're all over the map here in terms of what kinds of meetings people may need to do a little bit more of, and that's fine because you're all different people and you're in different places, and that makes sense. The point is you're thinking about what is most important for you and what you're working on. All right, so again, at the beginning, many of you talked about what were some of the challenges that you were facing, like how to communicate effectively, frequently, and so on. Communicating better by email or feeling out of the loop, figuring out what people's challenges are, better managing your time. Let me make a couple of statements here about telephone and email. In this environment where people are working from home, you want to use more private meetings, and sometimes that can be on a virtual platform, or it might be the telephone, particularly if you've got to have a private conversation with someone, maybe about work performance that might need to be improved or some deliverable that didn't come in as expected. You want people to have their dignity in their home environment, not have their family members hearing everything that's going on at work, where they may be you know, getting some feedback that's more on the constructive side of things. So use the phone sometimes when you need a little more privacy, if that person doesn't have headphones and so on. And you also use the phone when it's just a quick connection and you need to have a conversation. It's not going to be a whole hour or whatever, and where maybe it's not as important that you see each other to gauge emotion and so on. So just remember, even though it's an old-fashioned tool, the telephone is still very useful and very helpful. The email, I think email is great if you just have information to share, and there's really not a need for conversation. If you start seeing back and forth on email and a lot of questions, it may serve you better to jump on the phone or to jump on one of the virtual platforms in order to have that conversation. Now, as I mentioned, in this amount of time that we have, we really can't cover everything that there is that you could possibly focus on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you how you can continue to work with me in some other ways. And then after that, I'm going to share a few more things related to the virtual context, and then we'll go into Q&A. So one of the things I wanted to let you know about is that I do have a step-by-step process of instructions that really work for creating teams empowered for dynamic organizational results. And what this is, it's a very easy to use online course that's perfect for the virtual environment because you can work on it together whether you're in the same room or not. So I want to tell you a little bit about that and about a special offer I have with respect to that, and then I'll share a few more items with you about the virtual context. So in this team course that we have, you will get team members who walk in clarity of purpose and direction, who are aligned together and on the same page, who are giving each other feedback and resolving conflict, who are collaborating and innovating together, and who are also partnering with key stakeholders to create win-win solutions. They're going to be producing more and earning more, or if you're in a nonprofit organization, achieving the mission, and they have success that they can celebrate. So if you want these kind of results, please just type yes in the chat box. Just type yes if you want these kind of results. And I'm going to continue to go on, but I want to hear your yes in the chat box as well. So the Teams course that we have that's online is 5 basic modules. They're videotaped. I'm your instructor. I'm there. It was recorded in our offline outside studio. And The first module is the who, what, and why of high performance teams. What are those teams? What does it take to resource them? What do they need? What do you build in first, second, and third? How do teams relate to your competitive advantage in the landscape? How do you create a best place to work? Those are the kind of things we're talking about there. Forming the team, thinking about who do you need on there in terms of the diverse skills, the complementary skills, thinking about how do you set ground rules for how you're going to meet, ways you're going to treat each other, how you're going to interact. That's all part of it as well. The third module is the longest, which is create the team communication culture, because there we talk about how to give each other feedback, the positive and the negative. We talk about how to resolve conflict and various other ways to communicate that really helps that team to become more innovative and more trusting together. We also, in Module 4, talk about who are the stakeholders out there, the partners that you're going to need to work with in order to be more effective. And what are the current roadblocks and how do you scale those? How do you get win-win results with partners who may be resistant? And then in that fifth module, you're going to have lots of successes to celebrate. So we're going to talk about how to celebrate those and how to end well. In addition to those 5 modules, this Teams course also has a note-taking guide so that as you're listening to each of these, you're taking notes on what's critical, what's most important, and you have assignments to do. Those assignments you do with your team so that you apply the content to your context and to your work environment. There's also some bonus content. What are the top 7 mistakes organizations make in launching and developing high performance teams? What are the 7 success factors that you need for creating teams empowered for dynamic organizational results? And periodically, I will do fireside chats on issues of importance to teams. And so those fireside chats will also be put in the course. And periodically, there'll be bonus modules on special topics, like this one on virtual teams. We will put virtual team information in the current course, as a matter of fact. And periodically, I have podcasts from the Voice of Leadership show that are on Teams, and those will become part of just the bonus modules that are in the Teams course. When you get the Teams course, you can use it for up to 10 team members, which is wonderful. And you tell us what you need. We will continue to create additional modules, add that to the course, and you will always get the new modules, the fireside chats, the podcast, and any other bonus content forever. And that's a great deal, that we will continually add to it. So it's really an evergreen kind of a course. Now, what's special that I'm offering right now is a super special bonus. The Teams course is a do-it-yourself course. That means you take it, use it with your team on your own. Right now, during this time, I'm actually offering 3 complimentary group coaching sessions with me so that you can implement seamlessly with your team. And some of the segments of the Teams course that you might find challenging to facilitate, I'm going to facilitate those in the group coaching session so you have a chance to see what does that look like. I'll model that for you. You can bring your challenges, your questions, your issues, your problem people. How do I deal with this type of person? And we'll address all of that in the live coaching sessions. If you can't attend live, then definitely we'll send out the recording to you and you can submit questions in advance. So this is something that's normally not offered with the Teams course, but because of the time period we're in, I'm offering that as just a complimentary bonus for right now. Now, most of you here might know something about me, others do not. Why me? To share this information with you. And I always want to share a couple bullet points. I've got more than 30 years of experience working in all of these different sectors: corporate, federal government, US military, nonprofit organizations, and that doesn't even include my active duty time in the military, my time in private practice. So lots of experience working with people, and my education is in clinical psychology, so I know a lot about people and what people want, what people need, what's important to them. And over the years, a proven track record of really helping clients get to a better place. That last one there is really important about the way I work. I provide a lot of care and support to my clients. So you will have a partner, somebody to work with you to make sure that you get the results that you are looking for. So you won't be alone in the process. I want to also just share a couple more content pieces with you. We talked a lot about meetings that you can have with your teams in this virtual context. Please remember that your individual connections and meetings with your team members are still incredibly important. And I think a lot of people are really feeling as though they're cut off from their individual team members. And so what I want you to, and that's why those quick start meetings and the wrap up meetings really give you an opportunity to see who you might need to meet with one-on-one. So you still want to conduct regular one-on-ones with people on a virtual platform or on the telephone. You want to acknowledge their successes and accomplishments. You want to find out what challenges, concerns, and frustrations they're having so that you can help them with that. Give them feedback. Hold them accountable for the results that they're supposed to achieve, those expected deliverables. And together with those people, you still want to have improvement plans to meet the objectives. And you also want to identify steps for their individual development and their career progression. They're still working. They still care about their career. They need to see you still caring about that in terms of the one-on-one meetings that you still have with them. Remember, when they're working from home, they can feel isolated and like no one cares. And in that context, begin to make up stories about what's going on. And those stories really don't reflect reality. When you show up and you're there and you're being the team leader as always, you're letting them know that they're working for a reason and a purpose. Now, as far as tech issues, that can be a challenge when it comes down to these virtual meetings. So you want to find out about the unique challenges that are in each team member's environments and make sure that they have the equipment that they need. Some companies provide the equipment. Great. Then provide the equipment that you know they're going to need to do the work. Or if you don't provide the equipment, give them a list of recommended items that would be useful in terms of the kinds of meetings that your organization is going to have. Not everyone has all of these tools in their home context, nor do they necessarily know which ones might be best. So you might be able to recommend the meeting platforms, headphones, types of microphones, all of that. And because many of you are working in environments particularly where data protection is important, you want to conduct security briefings so they know how do they continue to protect data even when they're working from home. That means you also want to provide some degree of tech support, someone they can call, someone they can talk to get more in-depth assistance. That means that some people, not only are you going to do the sort of little tech briefing that we did at the beginning of this meeting, and I suggest that you do that, especially at the beginning, because some people won't know how to use all of these tools. There are others who need much more support, and for that, offline, have additional meetings with them where they can get in-depth tech sessions about what they may need. And even if they think they don't need it, you begin to say, well, I noticed that on a recent meeting, you were not muted, even though we said for people to be muted. So that lets me know there may be something you still need to know about how to use the system. And so you let them know why they may need an in-depth meeting, even if they don't think they do. So that's one of the things you want to cover with the tech issues.